Hi, Sarah here. Welcome back. Today's video is a follow-up or a sequel to the other video that I did featuring my animal decks. In that video, I mentioned how I sometimes like to pull out decks that don't have any people in them. In this video, I wanted to share something similar, where in times where I don't feel like reading a deck with people in them, I like to pull out one of these decks. Some of these decks do have people, but they're very non-traditionally drawn. Some of these decks will have no people, but they might have some faces or bodies of people. And some of these decks just straight up don't have people. So if you're interested in how a tarot deck can function if there's no people in it, keep on watching to see what decks I do have and enjoy. So the first soft category of this whole video is decks that feature faces. So the first deck I want to show is something that just came out in May this year. It is the Child Tarot. This was created by Firefly Tarot. This is their YouTube handle, youtube.com/channel Firefly Tarot. And I was lucky enough to stumble upon this deck just a month or two ago. Yeah, just a month ago, really, in May 2023. And I really enjoyed the look of it. And I decided it would be very fitting for my collection. So these are the backs. The cardstock is very slippery, as you can see. So the premise of this deck, this is an extra signed card that the creator sent. So the premise of the Child Tarot is that this is a deck meant for children or for inner child work. And I've made a video about why I don't fully resonate with inner child work and the ways that I kind of make it work for me. This deck does not feature like the traditional type drawing of people. For example, you can see here that like the characters are just all white, and they're drawn kind of like how a child might draw them. They're definitely drawn in the way that I would draw them if I was a child. And even my own sibling, like they also like to draw. They drew as a child, they still draw now, and they also tend to draw in this sort of style. So this deck really reminds me of their drawing style and my old school drawing style. So this deck is fairly new. Since I just got it last month, I haven't gotten a chance to actually read with it or use it too much. I have looked through it, I have looked at the suits, but I haven't done any deep dive or sort of walkthrough with this deck yet. But I know that this is a fun deck for me to just look through because it feels very innocent and childish, and it feels just carefree in a way. Not just carefree in that like there are no problems, but just carefree in the sense that like there must just be so much weighing on this child's heart that may feel very small in the long run, but to a child it's still very big and very important. And that, I don't know, that kind of feeling just really comes through the deck for me. This idea that our problems may seem really, really big in the moment, but also in the long run, maybe 5-10 years from now, or to other people, they might not be that important. And or to other people, they may seem totally manageable. So I just really appreciate the energy that this deck brings, the complete like innocence, the whimsicalness of it, and yet it just still feels very earthly and very real. I honestly did not have much summers free to myself as a child because I was always going through summer school every single summer, but I really can't imagine myself having this sort of carefreeness, whimsicalness that this child is displaying here. And I can totally imagine myself like having this sort of feeling, and this scene just, I don't know, this feels very vivid to me, even though it's drawn in kind of a childish way. So this, compared to other decks that also feature kind of like childish art, like the Badly Drawn Tarot, the Doodle Tarot, this deck just really hits my heart in a way that those other decks have not connected with me. So I really appreciate that this deck exists, and I really appreciate that no matter what the drawing style is, there are so many different kinds of art and artists out there in the world who can create different kinds of tarot decks. I never would have thought that this kind of drawing style would become a tarot deck, but here it is, and here I am holding it. So that's a deck here, a deck with faces, but non-traditional kinds of people, the Child Tarot. Another deck with faces and with non-traditional drawings of people is the Future Ancestor Tarot. This is another indie deck. This creator lives in the Philippines. I bought this deck secondhand, also from someone in the Philippines, and it was definitely pretty pricey, but fairly regular price as far as indie decks go. So these are the backs. This is a linen finish, so the cards are kind of slippery, not as slippery as the other one I just showed, but still kind of slippery and very easy to shuffle with. So the Future Ancestor Tarot is another deck that features non-traditional depictions of people and still has faces. And I use the word non-traditional for lack of a better word because, for example, in this scene here, we see 3 heads, but we don't really see the rest of their body. It just kind of fades or blends into the space behind them and around them. So that's why I say kind of non-traditional, because not all of the details of the people or the figures of the character here are fully depicted. Again, like this upper body here, only upper body being shown. And it's not really important to the scene that the rest of the body is depicted. So it's a little bit of an artistic lens, an artistic depiction of these people or characters here. So why I enjoy this deck is ancestor work is something that some people have talked about in the divination community, and it's something that I have been interested in. One of my grandmas passed away, unfortunately, the same year that I was born, so I've never ever gotten a chance to meet her except for, those few months where our lives overlapped. And one of my grandpas, he passed away while I was in high school. My other grandma, she lives in another state, in a whole different, just across the country. And my other grandpa, I don't speak to him too much either. So I'm not super connected with the generation like right before my parents. I have met other great aunts, great uncles, siblings of some of those grandparents, but I'm not super connected with them either. And honestly, as like an Asian American, as an Asian diaspora person, it does hurt me because family is something that Asians do value a lot. And sometimes I just do feel sad that I'm not super connected with the people before my parents. I'm barely connected with my parents as it is. I don't know too much about like their own histories and their own like, how life was when they grew up. So the idea of ancestor work has always intrigued me, but a lot of decks out there that are featuring ancestors and or that other people use for ancestor work, they're just not decks that really resonate with me. Part of the reason is because those other decks, they do feature like more fully fleshed out people, and it's pretty easy for me to feel disconnected from those depictions of ancestors because I am Asian, I'm not white and I'm not black. I'm not like those other types of people who are commonly depicted in ancestor type decks. So this deck has been helpful for me because it's a bit more shapeless, it's a bit more abstract, but at the same time, because it's a Filipino creator, there is that Asian origin that I feel connected to in this deck. So the fact that this was done by an Asian creator does make me feel more connected with this deck, and it makes me more willing to give it a shot and try to imagine what ancestors might have connected with me or what ancestors might have wanted to say to me and or what I want to say to my future descendants or, as the deck says, future ancestors. So the spaciousness of this deck really is a great art choice, and it just really fits this vibe of the deck so much. The type of spaciousness is something that I really appreciate because when it comes to ancestor work, I want to be very careful that I'm not just projecting my own biases and ideas onto like what my ancestors might have thought or what they might do. Being a secular or skeptical reader, I do just take the concept of ancestors as like kind of prompts. Like I don't really believe that my ancestors are actually talking to me through these decks. I would like to, but I don't have experiences that would lead me to believe that they're actually talking to me through these decks. So, I just use the concept of ancestors as, kind of a guiding light and as prompts for me to try to think about what I want for my future and reflecting on how I got here and stuff. So that is another deck that does not feature, traditional depictions of people, the Future Ancestor Tarot. Now, another deck that also features faces and amorphous types of people is the Lilifer Tarot. I'm reusing a different Christmas bag for this deck. It normally comes in a box. So the Lilifer Tarot is a beautiful deck, really. I love the rainbow backs. I am a sucker for rainbows. I have said this over and over. I just love the rainbows. Oh, look at that beauty. So the Lilifer Tarot is another amorphous type of deck because, oh, look at that. Just 3 court cards right off the bat. As you can see, they're not really people. They're more just different types of beings here. This is the first edition. I know that there is another edition that is currently being fulfilled on Kickstarter that does feature like, I believe keywords and some of the numbers are a little bit clearer. I don't really know what the changes are, but suffice to say, I have the first edition and I enjoy it. This is a deck that I want to work with and study more this year. I've been working on learning the images and kind of internalizing some of the imagery and the meaning and learning these Arabic numbers a little bit more. One thing I really like about this artist is the way that she uses the physicality of the bodies to kind of help illustrate the concept. She also made the Reclaim Oracle, which is by far one of my favorite decks. This idea of holding all of your cups to yourself, this idea of holding all of your pentacles to yourself and wanting to shield yourself with these pentacles, like shield these pentacles from the outside world, like that is really cool. And that can be conveyed through the art here. So I really love the artistic liberties that this artist takes in her art. This deck is so fascinating to me in so many ways. The numbers, the fact that it's not labeled, the fact that these figures just convey the energy through just who they are. It's just really fascinating to me. Since I haven't worked with this deck too much as of this video, again, I don't have too much to say in depth about it, but I do know that it's just a fascinating deck, and the fact that they're not really people, they're just more figures, really hits home to me. Something that does slightly irk me about this deck is that in the guidebook, the creator does mention that they put the queens like above the king. So instead of the typical tarot order of like page, knight, queen, king, they decided to go page, knight, king, queen. And the reason they did this, according to the book, is because to try to flip the patriarchy on its head, right? To try to overturn or counter the idea that queens have to be below the kings. Like in this deck, the queens are like above the kings, even though they're still equal, kind of like that idea. However, what irks me is that literally a page later, they also mention about how tarot has divine feminine and divine masculine energies. And that's something that I just completely do not believe in at all. I think it's pointless to gender energy. I think it's a concept that it's a human-made concept, almost a colonial-made concept that we're just projecting onto like everybody around us. And I don't think that like this world, this universe exists in a binary of like divine feminine and divine masculine energies. So that was a contradiction that like definitely irked me, but you know, that is what it is. That's the creator's opinion, not my opinion. Besides that, I like the shapelessness, the general shapelessness of this deck. The depiction of some bodies as not particularly feminine or not particularly masculine is something that definitely appeals to me, because sometimes the unnecessarily like gendered figures of decks does irk me, because sometimes it's like I just want to see a figure. I don't want this figure to have like boobs to tell me like, oh yes, this is a woman. Like I don't think that sort of imagery is always necessary in tarot. So I like the general shapelessness. For example, what do I mean by that? Like, what gender is this figure? I don't really know. Just androgynous, amorphous, right? That's what I mean. So this kind of art does appeal to me, and that's a reason why I still have this deck and I enjoy it and I want to use it even though I haven't used it yet. So that's a look at the Lilifer Tarot, another deck with faces and with amorphous figures. The last deck in this subcategory of faces is the Dream Vision Tarot. I believe this one is going out of print soon because the creator is working on other projects. So if you're interested in this deck, definitely check out the creator's website before they're finally sold out. This is the first edition that I've got. They've got another edition out on the market. Anyway, this is the Dream Vision Tarot. Very colorful backs, one of my favorite backs. So this one also features faces and non-traditional depictions of people. As you can see here, they look like cosmic beings, really. I believe that's how the creator described them as well. They're more like cosmic beings who kind of appeared to them, kind of like spiritual beings, light beings. I don't really know the proper term, but some sort of spiritual beings. This is another deck that I enjoy because of its like non-people centered depictions. Compared to the other deck so far, the colors on this one really, really stand out. There's so much vibrance and life and energy in these cards because there's just so much color just bleeding through everywhere. So this deck definitely lives up to its name of the Dream Vision Tarot because it is so dreamy, and it does give me lots of visions and ideas for the future. I really like that this deck does feature like this kind of cosmic type beings. This is the only deck that I have that I would consider like a spiritual looking type of deck. This one and maybe the Lilifer Tarot, but really this is the only like cosmic type of deck that I have because I just don't really connect too much with, I don't know, cosmic concepts or energies. So this is the closest that I can get that it still makes sense for me and it still makes me feel like cosmic in a way. Something that's really cool about this deck is a lot of the art a lot of the cards are very, very close up on these figures or these faces, which makes it feel very like up close and personal. For example, we see the Six of Wands. Granted, there is this person right here, but the larger focal point of this card is really like this big hand here. The Knight of Wands, we're getting a very close look at this knight here. Temperance, instead of the full body, like typical Rider-Waite-Smith depiction of like the full body with the 1 foot in water, 1 foot on land, we literally just see up close this face and these two hands. So it's a very dynamic deck in that way because we're getting a very close look. We're just getting up close and personal. We're taking a look at just what's the most important thing, which is like these figures, these hands, these like little portraits here. And I think that's just really cool. So it definitely gives me the vibe of like ghostliness almost, you know, spirits and ghosts, kind of that idea. So this is a really cool deck, and I would definitely recommend anyone who's interested in cosmic stuff, like definitely check this out. It is an indie deck, so it is a bit pricier. Of course, I'm not, you know, you can do what you want, buy it, don't buy it. At least just ogle the deck and enjoy the art, right? So this is another deck that I have that features faces and amorphous people, the Dream Vision Tarot. The next category I want to show is decks that feature some sort of people, but with no faces. Let's start with this one, the Somnia Tarot. This is another indie deck, and the first thing I have to say about this is the cardstock is very hard to shuffle. It's pretty stiff, but it's definitely worth a shot if you're into photography and if you're into like slightly haunting or eerie vibes. So the Somnia Tarot is a deck that is a photographic deck. So all of these pictures are just photographs, which I think is super duper neat. And they either feature people that have hoods on them, or they feature people that are just, they have their eyes or faces covered in some way. So you never really see any full-on faces in this deck, which I think is really cool. The fact that this is a photographic deck and they were able to create these scenes and depict them and photograph them is so cool to me. Side note, I read that these are glass horses and not real horses, which I think is also like extra cool. But yeah, the fact that they were able to create these scenes and take photographs of them is super cool, and it gives me a whole new respect for photography and what people can create with the right tools and the right vision. So this being a deck that doesn't feature faces, I found this incredible to read with, especially in the context of past life readings. I found this such an interesting deck to read with because there is just this certain timelessness. The fact that these these people, they are wearing robes and not really any clothes that are associated with a specific time period, it makes it really easy for me to just read these as like energies or ideas instead of getting bogged down in the details of people. Sometimes when I read decks with people, either with people's faces or with like their clothes, it's easy for me to get like bogged down in the details of like, I wonder what this person was thinking when they were photographed, or like, I wonder what type of person this is that is getting depicted in this card, or like, I wonder if this person, you know, believes that gay people should exist or something. Sometimes it's just easy for me to get in my head about people, the real people in this life, in this earth that I know or that I might expect to meet, that it's hard for me to read people decks that way. So this deck being, you know, faceless in a way is very, it helps me bypass all of that, and it helps me not get bogged down in the nitty gritty or the ideas of like what or who these people are. So I know some people are not a fan of this type of imagery. I know it's creepy to some people. I'm just saying for me, it definitely just works. It definitely just works. Side note, I was doing a reading for someone and this came up. It was a past life reading, and the closest analogy I could think of with this Three of Cups is like the ladies who go to brunch, and like you kind of had to consider, do you actually want to go to brunch with these ladies, or do you only think you do because you just want to be a part of the crowd? So every time this comes up, I always think of that weird analogy that I made about the brunch ladies. Like, of course, doesn't this look like the epitome of brunch ladies to you? So yeah, oh, these cards just give me such great memories because I've done so many past life readings with these. It's just such an easy deck for me to project onto and like to read and to tell stories with. So I really enjoy this deck. I think this is my like epitome of a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Yeah, so this is the Somnia Tarot, another deck that features no faces but with people. Another deck with no faces on people is the Midnight City Tarot. So this one is themed after the city of New York. And it is a beautiful, very romantic type of deck. And when I say romantic, I don't mean romantic as in about love and relationships. I mean romantic in the way that it's very sweet, you know? The colors in this deck are more candy themed. And I'm actually doing a tarot and practice video right now where I am doing multiple readings with this deck and sharing some of them on camera and just collecting my overall thoughts on this deck. So the Midnight City Tarot, as you can see, has a very strong color palette here. It's very like cotton candy, pastel type of color palette. No, I don't want to say pastel. I think it's more just like pinks and blues and purples and a little bit of yellow too. I don't really know what kind of color palette it is, but the guidebook describes it as like kind of candy themed colors. So I'll just say candy themed colors. So as you can see, this deck features no faces, just silhouettes and the night sky, as the guidebook mentions, in place of people. So instead of faces, instead of any details on the people, they're just night sky, kind of to represent the universe, how the universe is in us. I like that this deck does not feature any specific people. It just features kind of these shapeless, faceless people. I do wish there was a little bit more body diversity, like some of these figures could be a little bit bigger. Maybe there could be some like disability diversity here, but you know, that's a thing. So the fact that there are just people, no faces, it is easy for me to just imagine more the energy of the scene instead of, again, being bogged down by like, you know, who specifically that person is. It would have been cool to see a New York deck that is themed around or features different types of people. But I think a deck like that already exists. It is the Urban Tarot. That one is another city themed deck. And I know that one features a lot of different people, especially like queer people as well. So this is another type of city deck that just vibes with me more than the Urban Tarot. Also, the Urban Tarot is more of a Thoth style tarot, whereas I'm more of a Rider-Waite-Smith sort of gal. So yeah, I'm glad that this exists as another city deck that I could enjoy. So I like the vibes, you know, the fact that the silhouettes are just silhouettes. It's easy for me to project onto the cards. It's easy for me to just read like the energy and just imagine like what might be happening. There's a certain charm in the facelessness of the decks, of the people here. It's just easy for me to read with. So I will update y'all on how my tarot and practice with this deck goes once that video is up. So that is the Midnight City Tarot, another deck that features people but no faces. All right, this deck did not come with the bag. It is from makeplayingcards.com, and I will admit I definitely have not used this deck once since I've bought it, but I still have it. This is the Inner Dimensions Tarot. Since this is from makeplayingcards.com, the cardstock is pretty slippery and it is pretty easy to shuffle with. But yeah, I admit I have not used this once yet since I've gotten it, just because I'm working on other decks at the moment. So this deck, and I'm holding the deck upside down. So this deck features hardly any people. It does feature a very small amount of people, but the majority of the deck does feature only hands. I don't even think it features bodies at all. So this is a very like faceless type of deck as well. It's very genderless in that way. It's genderless because even the court cards have been renamed. So source instead of, I don't know, maybe the page or the ace, the practitioner instead of possibly the knight. Yeah, I have not used this deck much. I have my notes on this written down somewhere. The guidebook is a PDF, so you can only look at it online. It is an interesting deck, though, that I would love to get to know more, which is why I've got it. It's also, the student here is probably the page. The source is probably the ace. So that's that. So here's an example of the people in this deck having no faces and not really any bodies either. We've got the master, which is probably the king, the empress here. So this deck, as you can see, is also fairly minimalist. This is one of the more minimalist decks that I have, but this is like my brand of minimalist because there's still kind of some idea for me to go off of. I don't really click with those decks that are just the pips on the cards and then nothing else. Like I like that there is something for me to go off of here. It's a deck that is going to make me think for sure. And I'm pretty excited for when I get the chance to finally work with this deck. I think it'll be an interesting study, and yeah, I can't wait to see what I learn from this deck. So this is a quick look at the Inner Dimensions Tarot. You know, as you can see, the majority of the cards just really don't have any people in them. So it's going to be an interesting study when I get around to it. The Inner Dimensions Tarot. The last deck in this category of no faces is the Weaver Tarot from Threads of Fate. So, fun little story about this deck. I had a different edition of this deck, bought a second hand, and I studied it for a while. I was kind of done with it, so I sold it. And then a year or two later, I decided I still wanted a copy of the deck because it is just so gorgeous and I wanted to have like the prettiest deck ever. So I ended up getting this deck. But let me tell you how many times I've used this since I got this last year. 0. By last year, I guess I mean within the past 6 months. So in the past 6 months since I've had this deck after rebuying it, I've used it 0 times. But oh well, that's okay because I have the space and I have the money and that is fine. So this deck features no faces, and I was going to say it doesn't feature people either, but the fact that it features hands makes me put it in this category instead of the next category. So this deck has gold foiling on all the cards, which makes it just a very pretty deck. It is definitely an experience to handle. It's a whole experience to shuffle it, to handle it, to lay down cards. There's a little bit of mystery in these cards too that makes me feel like very witchy when I want to read with it. However, the fact that it is a little bit mysterious also makes it feel kind of like a high priestessy in a way where it's mysterious, but it's not really like telling me or inviting me to actually read with it. Someone else on YouTube said it well. They said that the deck felt like cold, and honestly, I kind of feel the same way. Like these cards are really pretty, but there's not much feeling for me personally in these cards that entices me to actually want to read with it. But I think that can be a good thing because compared to the other decks that I have that are very full of life and energy and movement and all that stuff, this deck actually brings me to the opposite energy, right? It's just cold, maybe neutral, maybe a bit of a mystery to decipher, and I kind of appreciate that. I kind of want to get more into that. So yeah, this deck just does not feature any people, like I mentioned. It's just objects. So this can be hard to read for many beginners, but again, for me, it is definitely an experience. And the reason why it's in this category is just because it features hands and because they have like nails like this. They do kind of code a little bit feminine for me, but that's, that's how it be sometimes. So yeah, this is the Threads of Fate Weaver Tarot, a deck with no faces and hardly any people either. Now, this last category is one that I've been looking forward to the most. This category is decks with no people at all. The first deck that I'm going to show real quick is the Majestic Earth Tarot. This does not feature any people. It does feature only paintings that have been kind of repurposed, or not repurposed, curated is the word I'm looking for. Curated into this tarot deck. So I'm just going to show this really quick because this deck is out of print. I guess I put this in the category of not featuring people, but this does feature like oil paintings and some of them do feature people here. But the majority of the deck, the focus is not on the people. The focus is on the landscapes, the whole energy, the whole scenery, which I think is so beautiful. So this is just a little preview of the whole category here. Again, I don't want to show this too much because there are other walkthroughs and this deck is out of print. And I talked about this in another video before, I believe. I guess while I have it, I could say a few more words about this. This is the first ever like landscape deck that I ever got, landscape or nature-y type of deck that I ever got. And I found it so intriguing to read with. The fact that it has these like little keywords on the bottom does help it be a lot more readable to me. I was someone who didn't really understand the appeal of landscapes and going out into nature and going sightseeing and looking at just scenery. I never really understood the value of that before, but this deck helped me understand like the value of that. Because when you can just stand at the corner of a cliff or the edge of a scene and just look over the whole scene and take in the beauty of it and just look at all of the different details, look at all the different details and stuff going on in the scene, the different colors, the shapes, the way that things slide and move into each other, like it gave me a new appreciation for scenery. So this deck is, did pretty good in that sense. So I appreciate working with this deck and reading with it when I want a chance to just breathe and kind of path work, just kind of like imagine myself in a card and imagine the sounds I might hear, the vibes, where I am, what feelings is this imagery evoking in me. So this is a good deck that I like to use and try to meditate with, in a sense. So that's a quick look at the Majestic Earth Tarot, a deck that features just landscapes? Yeah, not focused on people. Another landscape deck that's not focused on people is the Naturescapes Tarot. This bag does not come with it. This is some other bag that I found and used to house this deck. So the Naturescapes Tarot is available on Make Playing Cards. So this is a print-on-demand sort of deck. And unfortunately, I've got kind of a bow on it, but that's okay. That's part of using a deck, right? So the Naturescapes Tarot is another landscape or scenery type of deck where there are no people in this deck at all. This deck only features photographs. So the creator of this deck, Tina, she curated photographs and she looked at a lot of different photos and just curated them and chose certain ones to represent different tarot cards and put them together in this tarot deck, the Naturescapes Tarot. And I find this deck really, really fascinating. It was a hard deck for me to read with at first as well for similar reasons to the Majestic Earth, and that I didn't really understand the beauty of scenery or the point of why we were looking at scenery. But the more that I got to just work with this deck and at least look through it, the more that I just feel things looking at this deck. And I think that's just so cool. It's so cool that different photographs of places can make us feel these things. So really, kudos to the photographers, for capturing such beauty and bringing this to our attention. Taking photos on your camera is easy, but having the right composition, knowing the right time and the right angle and the right framing to take a photo is, it's a skill that people ought to learn. And these photographs are really, really immersive. They make me feel things. They make me imagine what things might mean. They make me imagine, what is the energy of the situation when I pull these cards in a reading. This is another deck that I would enjoy for meditative reasons, for when I just want to sit and kind of path work my way into a card. Just again, imagine how I got to this point. What am I seeing? What do I do here? Where do I go next? What is this scenery trying to teach me? Or what can I take away from this scenery? So it's just a beautiful deck. And I would say, even if you don't really understand tarot, this deck, it's a beautifully immersive deck with a lot of really beautiful photographs. And it's a great deck to use, especially for when I don't feel like looking at people. So this is the Naturescapes Tarot. Another photographic deck by the same creator is the Tarot of Architectural Objects. This one I also don't really have a bag for, so this is it. Again, same creator as the Naturescapes Tarot. Tina, Queen of Wands was her handle. The Tarot of Architectural Objects is another photographic deck where Tina just took a lot of different photographs and curated them into this tarot deck here. So this one features, as the name implies, architectural objects. So the swords are all windows, the wands are all doors, we have pentacles, which are stairs, and we've got the cups, which are statues and sculptures. So first of all, I think decks that do that sort of thing where they correlate certain objects with the suits is super cool. I don't think the Naturescapes Tarot did that specifically, so I think it's really cool that the architectural objects, there is some sort of matchy-matchy with the different suits and different objects here. I think the fact that this deck does not feature people, but it features these architectural objects is so fascinating. The fact that without people, just these photographs of objects can still depict the energy so clearly and so profoundly is so fascinating to me. So this deck is really cool. And I learned about this deck through Laura at Aquamarine18. I really like her tastes in decks. This is another deck that I have not worked with too much, but I do keep it around because I really like looking at the imagery. I really like imagining the history behind whatever these photos are. I don't know anything about the stuff featured here. I'm not really big on history or global, things. I will say I went to Vietnam earlier this year and I actually visited this statue. So I believe I saw the statue in person, which I think is super cool. But yeah, I don't have too much else to say about this deck because I haven't worked with it, but I am pretty keen to study it eventually and just really, really appreciate it. Just by looks alone, it is beautiful. I can't believe that such awesome photographs exist. And I get to see them and I get to hold them here in my hands. So that is another profound deck that does not feature any people, the Tarot of Architectural Objects. Just a couple more decks here. Another photographic deck is the Flow Tarot. So this deck is also another deck that features curated photographs from a different creator than the past two decks. So these also feature different photographs, and similar to the last deck, we also have some correlating matchy-matchy suits here. So the cup suit is clouds, the wand suit is waves, the pawn suit, pentacles here, and we've got the sword suit, which is snow. So I am so blown away that such amazing photographic decks existed and that people are able to find them and curate them into this awesome tarot deck here. Again, the fact that people are able to capture such amazing energy and such essence in photographs, and somehow people are able to kind of get that sense of whatever the tarot meaning is and kind of correlate them, that is really, really cool to me. And I really like that there is the little keyword or key phrase here to help me understand like what this tarot card means and how this photograph applies to the tarot card, the tarot meaning. This deck has given me a new appreciation for water, the water element, understanding and realizing that water is just such a core part of who we are and how we exist and live on Earth. This deck has helped me realize that and kind of gain more appreciation for that. The fact that water is in our oceans, water is in our air, water is in our skies, water is in our bodies, like that is really cool. The fact that water exists in all these different forms too. We have like snow and again the clouds and ponds and lakes and oceans. We have so many different ways that water shows up in our world, and the ways that water shows up, it like makes a different impact in whatever form it's in. I think that is so cool. So definitely this last category is just full of decks that are way more like energetically charged than I feel like my people decks are. Sometimes when there are decks with people, it's easy to just get bogged down in like the person in the scene. So when you take out the person, what are you left with? The scene itself, the landscape, the sky, the background. You have to look at the scene itself and kind of figure out what that scene is saying. I am using this as part of my year ahead spread. So every month I am looking at a different card and kind of focusing on that card for the month. And it's been really cool to learn about the deck this way and to incorporate different types of just water energy into my life. So that is another photographic deck that does not feature any people. This is the Flow Tarot. Finishing off with a bang, the last deck with no people in it is the Spectrowhirl Tarot. Woo! So I've just received this deck. Well, I bought it and received it in the mail like just last month. So this is another relatively new deck that I have not gotten the chance to use much, but I will say I have looked at it a lot and it is just so fun to look at. So, sorry, I couldn't resist. So look at all these colors. Look how beautiful these colors are, right? This deck does not feature any people. I was going to say it does not feature any animals, but here we are having an animal right here too. But there are no peoples in this deck, only the elements and only colors. Literally color is the only thing that this deck knows. And it does such an awesome, beautiful job at showing all these different colors. I got this deck because I've been wanting a different sort of energy, a different sort of imagery in my tarot reading lately. And even though I haven't used this deck yet, I do enjoy looking at the cards and I do enjoy looking at, the colors, like the colors, the different ways that the wands and the elements are depicted here, the ways that even just with the bajillion colors that exist out there, the creator is able to synthesize them and depict these cards in a way that still kind of makes sense to me. Like, it's kind of like playing Where's Waldo. It's like in this card, like where are the cups exactly? We have 1 cup, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there's a 7th cup right there, And in like some of the wands cards, for example, it's also pretty fun to kind of find where the wand is. Here's another like type of Where's Waldo card, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's the 8 cups. Since this is the last deck and I haven't worked with this, I don't think I should ramble on about this too much more than I already have. So that is a quick look at a deck without people, the Spectrowhirl Tarot. So that is a look at the decks that I have and enjoy with various states of having people or no people. I hope that this was insightful for you in some way, and or at the very least that you just enjoy looking at decks with me. If there are any other types of decks in my collection that you are interested in seeing or categories of decks, do let me know. Besides that, I don't have any other plans for certain categories of my deck collection so far. Let me know if you have any of these decks and how they work for you, and or if you have any thoughts or feelings about decks with people or without people. So that's all I got for today. Thanks for watching. Bye!